scale of this pandemic is much larger than the regular set of crises that we face every year.
Government should trust the private sector to behave responsibly.
It is not that they are not thankful, it's not that they're worried. They know that whatever assistance is being given to them is not sustainable.
To me, the big lesson seems to be that the preparedness matters.
Good morning. Welcome to Business World Insights on today's theme, Beyond Survival, Charting the Path to Business Recovery. I'm Willy Reyes, Editor-in-Chief of Business World and moderator of today's session. We are in the 11th week of lockdown, especially in Metro Manila, and we are looking hopefully to a further easing of restrictions come June 1. I believe we can expect an official decision on this by today. That, of course, doesn't mean that conditions will normalize to what we had been used to anytime soon. In fact, just last Sunday, I watched an interview with 4 Japanese experts leading efforts to come up with a vaccine who said that if we are lucky, we should have one by December 2021. So it looks like we are in for a long wait and for a long fight. Already, the economy in the first quarter ended more than 2 decades of growth with a 0.2% contraction, and it's widely expected that this quarter will be even worse. So what's a business to do right now? How should it plan recovery? Because amid chaos, there may be opportunity, to paraphrase Sun Tzu. Today, we have a lineup of speakers who will hopefully give us good ideas on how to restart and how to advance amid today's trying conditions. Our first speaker is Simon Wintels, partner at McKinsey and Company Singapore. He focuses on retail and consumer goods issues related to strategy, growing revenues, digital and advanced analytics, sales force transformation, and supply chain management. He first joined McKinsey at its Amsterdam office in 2007 and transferred to Japan in 2015 before joining the firm's Singapore office in 2017. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning. Many thanks to you, Willy, for having me join this exciting panel discussion. For McKinsey, I specifically lead our COVID-19 business response team for consumer goods companies across Asia. It's a pleasure to share what we've learned from looking at consumers, shoppers, customers, as well as numerous conversations and work that we do with our clients in the region. But let me start by saying that COVID-19 is first and foremost a major humanitarian challenge. And I'm deeply grateful to the tens of thousands of health professionals that are battling the virus and putting their own lives at risk. Of course, solving this humanitarian challenge is priority number 1. And much remains to be done globally to respond and recover from counting the humanitarian cost of the virus to supporting victims and families and finding a vaccine. But as you mentioned, in addition to the humanitarian challenge, there's some real implications for the wider economy, businesses and employment. And now more than ever, we have a dual imperative of saving lives and livelihoods. We should safeguard lives, suppress the virus as fast as possible, expand testing, quarantining, and treatment capacity, and finding the cures, treatment, and vaccines. But also at the same time, try and safeguard our livelihoods, right? Support people and businesses affected by these lockdowns, right? You mentioned 11 weeks. prepared to get back to work safely when the virus abates, and prepared to scale the recovery away from what's a significant trough in many countries, right? My colleagues at the McKinsey Global Institute, together with Oxford Economics, put the latest GDP estimates for the Philippines somewhere between -1 in 2020 if the virus is under control and economic response is relatively effective. But it could be up to -8% in 2020, with 2.5 to 4.5 million jobs at risk. So there's a lot of work that the public and private sector together need to do. And at McKinsey, we look at 5 steps basically to manage through this crisis. And most companies have managed the first 2, which are to resolve and be resilient. Right. The next one's all about returning and reimagining what this new world looks like. And most businesses have come to grips with the first 2, but it's really about what's the future going to look like, and nobody knows, right? Our research in the Philippines and across Asia has shown significant changes across how consumers, shoppers behave, right? We've seen a change in channels and a significant shift to at-home consumption away from dining in restaurants. We see a shift of value and a drop in discretionary spending. We see much more of a focus on safety and health and fresh foods. We see a shock to loyalty as consumers have had to switch the stores and the brands given availability and given lockdowns. We're seeing supply chains getting redrawn, working locations being recast and reimagined as a coffee place, as a spa. We all, having spent 11 weeks at home, know exactly what we mean with that. But we also see public and private contracts being redrawn, privacy expectations being reset, and I can go on and on and on. And some of these shifts will prove temporary, but some will become some of these new routines will become ingrained habits if they're practiced long enough. So the real question is how to deal with this new behavior, and that's what we're typically helping our clients wrestle with. I'll hand back to the next one. I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more in the discussion to come.
Thank you, Simon, for that general outline on what we can discuss later. Our next speaker is Gary de Ocampo, President of Kantar Philippines and CEO of its Insights Division. Mr. de Ocampo has, for more than 2 decades, helped clients grow by helping them apply business intelligence in fields like brand strategy, innovation, creative development, media strategy, and customer experience. These clients were from industries like fast-moving consumer goods, food service, banks and financial institutions, healthcare, telecommunications, automotive, government, and non-government organizations. He had served with the finance department before this and as managing director of TNS Philippines in 2008. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Willy, and good morning to all. To add to the context that Simon shared with us, let me give you a quick overview of what we are seeing from our ongoing COVID-19 barometer in the Philippines, which started before the lockdown and has now had 3 waves already since then, with 4 more to go. Next slide, please. We have seen that online Filipino adults are expectedly hugely more worried now compared to pre-lockdown. And this high level of anxiety has been sustained. This is despite getting accustomed to a certain extent to working and living from home and giving a thumbs up to the government's response to the crisis. Their sustained anxiety is largely coming from the expected long-term economic impact, which would be exacerbated by the dreaded second wave, which Filipinos are most worried about in Asia Pacific. Current actions to cope are to stock up on extra items, also highest in Asia Pacific, especially long shelf life food, sanitizing products, vitamins, and supplements. Filipino adults also claim to be eating healthier, trying out new recipes, sleeping more, exercising more, and focusing on personal development. In terms of purchase behavior, overall obviously declined across all channels, though we are seeing that 1/3 of online Filipino adults increased or tried out e-commerce for the first time. even though majority understandably cut down mostly on non-essentials. Many are compelled to switch to buying in groceries near their homes and depended on home deliveries. In terms of media consumption, TV viewing has spiked as expected, as in all other countries in Asia Pacific. But the Philippines has posted the highest increase in the use of radio, Facebook, Messenger, and YouTube. Also, in this uncertain time, when people are looking for hope and inspiration, there are several expectations from brands demonstrating being helpful in the new everyday life, informing people about brand efforts to face the crisis situation, offering positive perspectives, displaying concern about their own employees, donating to support frontliners, and making themselves available to the government to help society. Finally, online Filipino adults plan to decrease travels using public transport, ride-hailing, carpooling, as well as both by air and sea, either for work or personal. On the flip side, highest consideration is being given to making investments, subscribing to on-demand TV and movies, and to home broadband internet. A great majority look forward to meeting friends and relatives again and going back to church. These things, as well as other outdoor activities, are expectedly hard decisions to make as Filipinos struggle between wanting to step out of their homes on one hand and needing to ensure their own safety on the other. So as you can imagine, these changes in the needs and behaviors of Filipinos have had varying demand shock levels from one industry to another. In some categories, demand may have taken dormancy in the meantime, while in most others, it remains there, and it could even be growing in intensity, but is kept from being realized due to inaccessibility of channels. People have not been allowed to shop. Most people are too worried to shop anyway. And many people have lost the ability to shop when they lost their jobs. We think that reactivating demand is not as simple as reopening stores. But for business planners, it is a problem that we will have to address. Stores and brands can be well financed and always available, but if consumers cannot or will not shop and buy, then the whole system fails to get started. Every business in every category must remake itself then in order to send the signals that will reactivate demand. And it's not just about advertising messages, but every aspect of a brand's physical, digital, societal, and retail presence. It is really about signaling reassurance in every possible way. And hopefully in the discussion, some very practical things will come up this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for that overview of changes in consumer preferences and behavior. The third speaker is Winn Everhart, President and General Manager of Coca-Cola Philippines, a post he has held since 2018. In that period, Mr. Everhart has been responsible for executing the business strategy of Coca-Cola Philippines with its local bottling partner, Coca-Cola Beverages Philippines. On his second year of leading the Philippine business, he has championed packaging sustainability with the aim of collecting and recycling a bottle or a can for each one sold, and of using at least 50% recycled content in packaging by 2030. Good morning, Winn.
Good morning, Willie, and thank you for having me this morning. And good morning to everyone, all of you on the call as well. If you could pull up my slides, please. Here at Coca-Cola, we have a very simple purpose. And that purpose, as you can see here, is to refresh the world and make a difference. And now more than ever, with the pandemic we're experiencing, this statement cannot be any truer. Next slide, please. So as we think about the pandemic we're experiencing today, and as we think about the long history we've had, not only across the world, but here in the Philippines of over 108 years, we've really gone back to a simple formula of what does it mean to survive and what does it mean to succeed coming out of this pandemic. And really, as you can see on this page, it's really about putting our people first and really understanding their needs and ensuring the safety of our people, supporting the communities with which we operate. And then, as Simon said earlier, starting to think about, what does our business look like coming out of this pandemic, and what do we think about coming out of this crisis? From a people perspective, we've been very, very proud to ensure that all of our associates have A, stayed healthy, but B, also remained with a well-paying job as well as healthcare to support them. We've also been very cognizant of the fact that a lot of our associates are working from home and truly been focused on how to support them, whether it's through online learning or online engagement as well. And then for all those frontliners out there, for all the 15,000 associates we have working in the Coca-Cola system, I just want to thank you for all the hard work you're doing each and every day as our factories and distribution centers and plants and trucks continue to roll and ensure that everyone is being refreshed from our brands throughout the Philippines. From our community perspective, for over 108 years, we've always believed that we're only as strong and as sustainable as the communities with which we serve. In these unprecedented times, we know now more than ever the critical role we play in ensuring that our partners across the value chain of the company are also well protected and empowered. Thus, we're ensuring that we are supporting them in every way we can, from accelerating our presence in the digital space, helping restart small businesses, and access to resources and trade. And so as you think about where we've really been focusing our efforts, and as a commitment we've made as a company, we no longer spent any money on our advertising dollars in the month of April, and instead we repurposed that to the communities within the Philippines. And you can see here we've donated over 500,000 liters of beverages. We've been able to offer 50,000 different versions of PPE and equipment to our frontliner associates, as well as the healthcare workers within the country, as well as we're really starting to work with our small retailers and trying to understand what they need to either reopen their business or continue to manage their business. So we're very proud about those efforts, and we're really excited about some of the efforts we're making with those small retailers. But then when you think about the way forward, and this is what we can talk later about, as Simon alluded to, we're starting to rethink about, how do we think about this route to market? How do we think about this online world with which everyone is moving to very rapidly? We're also starting to look at the at-home occasion, as we'd like to call it, which is typically a place of strength for us here in the Philippines, but something we're really wanting to try to evaluate and understand how consumers' demands and consumption is changing along the way. And as such, we're also seeing categories starting to blur and starting to move and really starting to leverage that full portfolio with which we have here in the Coca-Cola system. So as we think about it, this is a high level of what we're thinking about today, but over the coming next few minutes, an hour, we can talk about more of how we think about coming out of the pandemic here in the Philippines. So with that, Willy, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Winn, for that overview on Coca-Cola's current priorities. The next speaker is the Director of Entrego Express Corporation, Mr. Nicky Gozon. Mr. Gozon is in charge of the strategic and operations direction of Entrego Express, a technology-driven business solutions provider that meets the logistics needs of Philippine enterprises. Before Entrego, he was an aviation professional with over 2 decades of experience in strategic planning, operations, risk and insurance, finance, and corporate development. Good morning, Nicky.
Hi, good morning, Willy. First, I'd like to thank you for having us here, and I'd like to thank Business World in sponsoring this online series of discussions, which I feel is very appropriate given the times that we now live in. I think this will allow everybody time to understand this new normal that everyone speaks of, especially now that we are re-entering the market, and we've actually been experiencing this new normal from the comforts of our own home. As everyone had said prior to me, we've all been working from home, and as we re-enter this new business environment, we need to understand how we, in the whole business community, supports each other. I think I need to stress that we need to support each other, because when you think about it, there is no playbook in how we will all cope in this new normal. We all have to help each other understand where we are. And more importantly, I'd like to stress, we all have to be patient with each other. We all have to understand that we ourselves are all trying to chart this new course in this new seas that we really don't, that we're trying to understand. Understanding where we are will allow us to gauge and assess things that we need to do to create our own re-entry strategies into our own markets. It helps us to build processes to make us more resilient after we've re-entered the market and allow us to transform and build our business and adapt to this new normal. We in Entrego feel that we are actually an enabler in this new normal, especially in a COVID environment. As we all know, we've all experienced it. As you said, Willie, we are on the 11th week of lockdown. Entrego is a logistics company that bridges markets to its consumers. So we will be your hands and legs. We can bring you, we can bring your goods to the customers and allow the customers to be engaged with you and allow us to now help you fulfill the business that you need to do in such a lockdown or a contactless environment. Let me end this opening remark by saying, and like what I have read in the past from a futurist called Lee Endelkrot, she talks about these opportunities to be a page, a blank page for new beginnings. She further talks about how consumer habits have actually changed as a result of this quarantine issues that we now have. So she actually talks about quarantine habits, essential and purposeful shoppings. She further talks about improvement in health and hygiene as we move towards understanding this new environment. And obviously, we all know it, we all see it, we all feel it. We are moving into a contactless environment. Virtually, we're doing this meeting. Normally, we would have been sitting in a sofa in front of everybody in a live audience. We're actually doing it virtually. We're all working from home. Most of us are. This maybe will be our future. And it becomes our future, obviously, we have to be agile and be able to pivot to these new futures, being able to address things that we haven't even thought about before. But more importantly, we should be able, like I said, be more patient with each other as we understand, as everyone is trying to understand this new normal for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicky, for that introduction on how your company views current conditions. For the fifth speaker, we have Vincent Tempongko, Vice President of Globe Telecom. He is in charge of site acquisition and management, including right-of-way, for network facilities. In this position, Mr. Tempongko develops strategic partnerships with key stakeholders, including government units. Before Globe, he had worked at Hewlett-Packard and at Procter & Gamble. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Willie. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Business World, for having us today. And good morning to all. Okay. Globe has been in the forefront of this pandemic. Connectivity has, now more than ever, become top priority as it is essential to keep people's lives and businesses going during the community quarantine. Okay. The impact could have been much worse if we did not have digital tools to support us during this time. The past 2 months have shown a shift from physical to digital interactions and transactions, as what the others have shared earlier, with companies adopting the work from home setup, schools pushing for online learning, brick and mortar stores even selling goods online, consumers relying on the internet for their daily needs, including entertainment. The road to recovery will require a pivot to digitalization. Companies, whether big or small, will be reliant on connectivity and digital tools to keep their businesses afloat. In the past few years, Globe has been enhancing its customer experience through digital means, whether paying bills, buying load, looking up data usage, pulling up a monthly statement. And these can all be done digitally through mobile apps. Globe has also been empowering the local economy by helping businesses flourish by providing them the right technology, infrastructure, and solutions. An example of which is helping them sell their products and services through digital payments via our GCash app. No? The GCash app has emerged as the top finance app for both the Android and iOS devices, reflecting the growing reliance of people on digital finance or payments during the pandemic. Lastly, all of this move to digital or digitalization requires reliable connectivity delivered through a robust network, meaning cell sites and fiber infrastructure and whatnot. Globe has been aggressively investing in and expanding its network, but we continue to be challenged, unfortunately, by tedious and slow LGU permitting processes. The Philippines suffers from having low site density compared to other countries due to lack of cell sites in relation to the number of internet users. The Philippines is behind India, the likes of India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. When it comes to cell sites to internet users ratio, today the Philippines has around 18,000 cell sites, whilst Vietnam, in comparison, has 90,000 cell sites. No, without the help of government, this will be a huge task for telcos such as Globe, no, to reach this number for the Philippines. However, Globe continues to be optimistic as there are some LGUs who have been leading the movement towards the digitization of their communities by making it easy to get permits and allowing Globe to build its network infrastructure. By doing so, they are able to take advantage of the latest technology, such as 5G in their towns, which accelerates their digital transformation and enables economic activity even during the crisis. We are also hopeful that other LGUs will have an epiphany or will realize the need for ICT and network facilities in this new reality or in our new world. Okay? As business recovery through digitalization demands better connection, better service, and better experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince, for that brief on how Globe has been keeping in step with a fluid market, challenges notwithstanding. Let's now proceed with discussions with our panelists. I think the first question that I'd want to throw to the group is, we already have some idea on how consumer behavior has changed so far in general. But I think people are also wondering, right, there are changes, but what changes are temporary and what are more permanent? What will stay even beyond, even after lockdowns are long over? I don't know who. Simon, would you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so happy to talk about that. I wish I had a crystal ball and could give you the exact answer. I think that the thing is we don't know. There's a few things that we see that we think will stick around for a bit longer. So we've seen a shift to more at-home consumption, and a shift and more groceries and a shift away from dining in restaurants. We have partnerships with other providers of information, and in China we still see that 2 months after restaurants are open again, people are coming slowly back to restaurants, but they're still at minus 20% of what they were pre-COVID. Right, so that's something that's slowly coming back, but has a severe longer-term impact as consumers, as some of my colleagues mentioned, are still afraid to go out shopping or go to restaurants. The second thing we see is a significant shift in online shopping, right? Less so, by the way, in the Philippines, but that was a bit more driven by the severe lockdown supply constraints. But we see significant uptick in online shopping and food delivery, but also package delivery. The second thing and I think that's something that we all believe in will remain very relevant. The other one that we should think about is, given the challenges and given the uncertainty in how the economy will develop, people will put more emphasis on affordability. So whatever you do in your assortment, you need to think about value for money and affordability, as well as a drop in discretionary spending. So Filipinos, as well as their Asian consumers in other countries, are thinking about postponing, up to 50% are thinking about postponing big ticket items, and that will have a significant impact on the economy. The other thing is safe, healthy, and fresh. So they've put a lot more emphasis on safe shopping environment, fresh foods and eating, as well as their health and immunity. And the last thing that I think will slowly go back to normal is you've seen a one-off shock, what we call a shock to loyalty. So because of lockdowns, people have changed their primary stores for shopping, as well as changed their brands. But Filipinos have proven to be relatively brand loyal and are going back to their their primary brands after most likely will return to those after the lockdown ends. So online for sure is here to stay. At home consumption away from out of home consumption slowly return. A shift of value and a drop in discretionary spend will be here for the longer term, especially given that the economy is likely to be hit for a little bit longer. And then the question is, they're safe and healthy and fresh, whether that wins out over the concerns for value and affordability. So there's still a question mark out there.
Thank you, Simon. Gary, same question. Your slides gave a great overview about changing consumer behavior and preferences. But then again, what is temporary and what will last?
Thank you, Willy. I definitely agree with Simon. There are certainly many changes in behaviors that have prompted a lot of talk about a new normal. And there is no doubt that changes are happening and more are coming. But I think it's worth thinking about this before jumping on the bandwagon. Not everything is going to change, even things that have changed a lot for the moment. Indeed, when we look at survey data, consumers are not saying that they aspire for a new normal. Consumers want to get back to normal. They want to return to what they know. And that's the real takeaway from the spike in comfort foods, from the observation that people are responding to TV commercials in much the same way as before the crisis. It points to consumers wanting less change, not more change. Routines will be affected, but may not necessarily be in the ways being popularized right now as the new normal. And they will definitely also vary across industries. Therefore, depending on which industry you operate in, consider which of these behavioral changes will be temporary and which will really be assimilated into the new and lasting ways. At least two themes from several that Kantar has identified may be considered by businesses as they start to operate again and even continue operation. One is hygiene, as Simon mentioned earlier. The definition of hygiene is definitely exploding. It will impact any form of interaction and engagement. Everything people touch will have to offer assurance that it is sanitized well, because hygiene has become a life-saving tactic. How can this be done without physical proximity and contact? Of course, facial masks will be a mainstay, but on the part of brands, how will we innovate, communicate, and execute sanitation in a meaningful and increasingly less disruptive way? Think about banks, restaurants, gyms, dental clinics, spas, etc. Will everything be online for banks? How can ATMs evolve to be more hygienic? We could also be seeing more of central drop-off deliveries, telemedicine, virtual reality to get a feel for anything before you buy it. And there's also a likelihood that in the future, health conglomerates will become the new authority on travel. And they could be releasing lists such as the top safest destinations to travel. What people really want is a hygiene perimeter within which they feel safe and can get back to normal. Each brand or retailer has to do this. And that's the first takeaway about the right signal to send to reactivate demand. Protect. Consumers are anxious for signals that brands are committed to protection. In the immediate phase after the lockdown lifting, which is not the same as post-COVID, social distancing may carry on as we know it. But as things normalize in a post-COVID scenario, this may stick, but may shift to respectful distancing, which will continue to influence how people behave. Now, the other change in behavior that Kantar is observing has to do with self-sufficiency. We think readiness will be the new sign of success, the new status symbol. People will want to be ready and not get caught by surprise again. They will want to know sources of essentials within their environs. Stockpiling could be normal. Think about pack sizes, different purchase cycles, long expiration dates, even do-it-yourself products. How about investments and insurance? And also, how about shopping futures or pre-buying, as in guarantees to ensure availability? Also think of possible need for storage solutions, because a safety pantry with long-lasting essentials may become a permanent fixture in most homes. There are, of course, several other teams, and they do interact and overlap with each other, such as the more general concept of life from home, with a number of people thinking that they are safe only when locked away, proving that working from home productively can work, though not without much difficulty, and realizing as well that living from home after developing habits over a quarter of the year in lockdown, this could be something that will carry on. There are also other themes like well-being, which we expect to focus on slowing down, science and home solutions. There's also the theme of flow, which means continuous supply of essentials that may involve subscription models. There's also the theme of experiences, which encourages multisensory or what we call multisensible experiences, practical and safe. In-home extension of usually outdoor activities like the closed-door DJ sets now gaining fame in Singapore. And then there's also the theme of connections, which inspire enhancements to digital intimacy and also necessitate minimized networks for companies, enabling companies to make claims such as 100% processed by machines, untouched by human hands, straight from the farm. Kantar partners with our clients to identify which of these themes are relevant to their respective categories. And what we do is to run workshops to do scenario planning with them.
Thank you, Gary, for that. I'd like to go down from the general view to what's been happening to the specific companies. For instance, Winn, same question. What have been your observations about how consumer behavior has changed for your company?
Sure. And a lot of what Simon and Gary have shared, I think, is very true and relevant to even our business. What we're seeing, as Simon alluded to, is a lot more at-home consumption. As we like to say in the Coca-Cola business, most everyone every day drinks about 2 liters of something a day. And what we're seeing now, because of the concern with pandemic and safety and everything else, that most of that consumption is occurring at the home, very little outside. So when we talk to some of our largest customers, whether it's been forced closure because of the quarantine or just based on traffic, they're down quite a bit or even non-existent with the absence of at-home delivery from, call it, food service aggregators or takeaway delivery as well from their stores. So for sure, we see a large at-home consumption play occurring. The other piece we're seeing a lot is even in the number of trips these consumers are making to their whether it's their supermarket, whether it's their sorry store, you name it. We're seeing the number of trips actually decline quite a bit. So if you think about it, the consumer is less likely to travel out and is trying to be as safe as possible. So when they do make it out, they're venturing out less, but they're actually buying more on those trips. And so the average number of items they're buying, as well as the spend that they're purchasing, is much higher. And in a lot of cases, that doesn't actually overcome the actual spend that they would be spending. So if you're to look at socioeconomic level, I think for the most part, your A and B consumers are still spending to what they spent historically. However, your C, D, and E, because of the less trips and because of the concern about welfare, they actually aren't spending as much. And so we definitely seen a decline in those pieces. And then I think the last piece that I would say is from an affordability perspective, I mean, that is ringing very true with our consumers. You can see it in how they're purchasing certain items, call it larger size items that are more for sharing, that typically have a better value, as well as you can see it even in some of the brands and categories with which they're even purchasing from a affordability perspective. And so I think for sure there is going to be a huge affordability component within the Philippines that we're going to have to be very mindful of in order to make sure that that consumer need and occasion is being met once we do get to what we call the next normal, not necessarily the new normal, but the next normal, and as we continue to evolve into the future world as well.
Right. I know that the Philippines has been a growth area for Coca-Cola, even the first quarter when COVID struck. But now it's widely expected that the general economy of this country will shrink much more this quarter. How does it look from your end?
So we've definitely felt the decline. As I alluded to before, you know, a lot of our business, when you think about our business, while we do have a strong at-home position, we also, a lot of our business is being served, you know, at restaurants, sporting events, you know, out with friends, out and about. So as that traffic has declined, we definitely have felt the extent of it. I will say we are very well positioned though, because we do have a strong at-home occasion, and consumers tend to, you know, having a 108-year history here in the Philippines, as Simon alluded to earlier, tend to be very loyal to our brands. And so we have seen at least some stability in the at-home consumption. However, that isn't nearly enough to offset the traffic decline, as well as the just the number of stores and outlets being open relative to the normal business. So we definitely see a less steady future within the Philippines. But I would also tell you that that's consistent with every market with which Coca-Cola operates. You know, the 200 plus countries we're in globally are also experiencing a very similar decline. So I think it's one that, as I said before, having a 134-year history, we've seen multiple pandemics, wars, and crises. And I think, you know, our belief is coming out of it, we're going to be even stronger based on the strategies we have in place today, and really focusing on that consumer and what those occasions we're trying to meet are.
Thank you, Winn. Nicky, can you give us an idea of how demand for Entrego services has changed since the year began? Nicky? I think this connection is cut. Our Vince, how much has network traffic grown, for instance? How has that affected your capacity for your infrastructure?
Okay. With the announcement of the ECQ, obviously everyone had to, a lot of the employees had to work from home. So we saw a shift, from mobile devices going into more of our at-home products such as broadband, and we've seen a significant growth in that area the past few months as people subscribe to both wired fiber and wireless broadband. And we've seen also an increase in our network traffic, quite significant increase. And we've seen that the behavior of consumers have been more consistent throughout the day. Previously, we'd see peaks and valleys during the day, especially at night. And now we're seeing that this traffic consumption or data consumption is flat throughout the day. So just like with what Winn shared earlier, we're seeing a lot of at-home use, as we move forward through this COVID crisis.
Yeah, people are saying now even grandparents have learned how to use telecommunication services.
Yes.
You have network expansion plans. How are they so far, and how does it drive your plans? What does it do here?
Okay. We've been working with various parties, various stakeholders, private sectors, and even the government. Well, we saw that an example was we saw that foot traffic was going down in a lot of areas, such as malls, airports, and even MRT and LRT, right? And we saw this as an opportunity to expand our services in these areas, by working with the mall owners, the transport officials, to allow us to do the necessary upgrades, to our network in these areas, as we speak, we are currently upgrading or putting on network facilities along the LRT2 tracks, with the cooperation of LRTA and Megatrend admin. They've allowed us to implement, construct our cell sites during the ECQ and even beyond the ECQ as we move towards maybe DCQ in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Simon, how fast do you think will consumers bounce back, at least consumer confidence bounce back to pre-crisis levels, or will they bounce back to pre-crisis levels?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, Willy. It's not that you're not the first one to ask the question. I think you're going to get the somewhat typical consulting answer of it depends. I think so. So my colleagues at the McKinsey Global Institute have looked at the different potential outcomes for the economy in the Philippines and the world economy. And basically the two main drivers that drive GDP growth or decline in the year and the years ahead is one is effectiveness of getting the virus under control. So the faster that is done and the better that is done, the faster the economy can recover because people can go back to work and consumers can go out shopping again. But the second one is very important, and I think Gary alluded to this, is the impact of economic policy. So how effective are the stimulus measures that come from the government as well as from others that have a role to play here? Because if they're not effective, it will take quite some time for the economy to recover. The main thing, though, to solve for is uncertainty. So if we looked at the past 100 years of crises, consumer uncertainty about what's next is the real driver of consumer sentiment, and consumer sentiment is a real driver of consumption. So the faster an economy or a market or a government is able to settle the uncertainty about what's going to come, so that means either quickly get the virus under control, put testing in place so people are safe when they go back to work or go back to shopping, as well as being effective on the implementation of these measures. The faster that is done and the better that's done, the lower the uncertainty and the quicker it can back. But it can be, so in China, we see it slowly emerging and grocery shopping is still up, but food service and dining in is still out. Malls are still minus 40% of what they were. And people are still more hesitant to still go out. So it will take quarters rather than weeks, and it could take up to 3, if not longer, years if it all doesn't go well.
Okay, Nicky, I'd just like to know regarding your company. Can you give us an idea of how demand for Entrego services has changed since the year began?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the others, no, but for Entrego, being a logistics company, we started delivering essentials even at the height of the lockdown because, as you know, logistics plays a very important role in ensuring that the links of the supply chain is not broken. We need to ensure that all of the lines uh, within that whole industry feeds everything because from manufacturing to consumer products will rely on the logistics supply chain. So initially we were doing the logistics for essential goods, which was allowed by government. And let me just stress, and I think people have alluded to it earlier, there's a very big importance in ensuring that there is confidence. Confidence in what? For us in Entrego, we needed to make sure that our employees are confident as they enter the market. At the end of the day, Entrego or any other company for that matter, I'm sure all the participants, Simon, Gary, Winn, Vince will agree that the success of any endeavor in any business will require the employees' support. So we needed to make sure that the employees felt confident as they entered the market. And that's why I alluded to the health and hygiene standards that we now need to ensure as we move forward, as we go into this new normal. Um, Having said that, we are not close to where we are pre-COVID numbers, but the way we see it, e-commerce will probably be here to stay, and this new COVID environment will probably hasten the development of e-commerce, will hasten the development of the digital platform, will hasten and change certain behavioral aspects that we have, as everyone had mentioned. Brick and mortar interdependence that we have is now changing. I personally, I use cash, right? During this COVID, I had learned to use digital forms of payment. I've learned to use GCash. I've learned to use online transfers. I think this will be things that we will now have to live with. And as we in Entrego have always said, for us to fight this, and people have said this, I think Simon has said it as well, and Gary, as we move and learn this new environment, we need to now change behavior so that we ourselves, as we learn to live and learn to react to the new normal, we now put processes in our own systems. For example, if I am a consumer, I have a product coming to me, a package. What I would do is have a table in front of me. The rider goes to the table, puts the package on the table, he steps back, then I go to the table. If I had done that prepaid through a digital form of payment like GCash, then obviously he can go and I can pick up my package and go inside. If I now am moving towards that digital and pay through cash, I will now put it in an envelope, leave it on the table so that the rider can get it. We ourselves should now learn to be more adaptive to the situation that we all live in. Um, Logistics will play a big role in bridging this gap as we now understand, and it's still evolving, this new normal. I think nobody, as Simon had said, nobody has a crystal ball. We're still trying to understand it and grasp the depth and the magnitude that we all face. So we in Entrego would like to ask everybody to be more adaptive to the situation, be ourselves participants in this new normal by being more conscious of what we need to do, and as well, as I said earlier, being more patient with everybody, trying to understand and adapt to whatever we need to do and make everybody safe. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the frontliners, our people in Entrego, for being out there serving everyone, especially in these times. Thank you, Willie.
Entrega has expansion plans, particularly for its distribution hubs. How's that coming along?
Well, for now, we've actually put a halt on expanding. We're trying to understand how this new landscape is going to change, how do you say, distribution. When I say distribution, maybe for now, we're still trying to understand, are the packages centered to city centers, or are they still going as dispersed as before? So, as much as I would like to have a cut and dry answer on expanding, yes, we are expanding. We see the growth. We see, and everybody talks about logistics as being a key driver in this new COVID environment. And once we see that, trust me, we will expand to the right areas to be able to meet the demand of everybody.
Thank you, Nikki. Gary, question to you. Again, when do we go back to pre-crisis levels in terms of consumer confidence? Do you see that happening?
Wow, that's a very interesting question, Willie, because as Simon and Nikki have both said, there's no telling, right? Um, the only thing that we have control over is planning. Um, that's why I was about to say earlier, especially with regard to what Nikki mentioned about being adaptive, that this is where the importance of scenario planning comes in. Because scenario planning helps us to become flexible. We have ready plans for whatever situation we find ourselves in. Um, Simon mentioned earlier some factors that are at play, how government and other institutions will behave. On the other hand, how people will behave. There's also the factor of how the disease will behave. So if we are able to understand these factors, we can then come up with scenarios from a people point of view and an institutional point of view. For example, if the disease will be recurring outbreaks and the response of people is controlled as opposed to being panicked, then we imagine a brave new reality that our brands and companies will have to operate in. On the other hand, if the outbreak is one off and the reaction of people is still panicked, then we plan a scenario that may be described as short term or just a panic attack. Um, from an institutional point of view, if recurring outbreaks are met with comprehensive response from institutions such as the government or business organizations, then we plan on stepping into a new economy, a new normal. On the other hand, if uh, the response of institutions is fragmented, the challenge then is how to imagine and plan for a future that will be characterized by putting out fires, which will, as you can imagine, be very difficult. So these future scenarios um, can act as the starting point to being ready for how the crisis might evolve. They will give us a framework for the evolution towards the new economy, which we have to define along with the shape of demand. We can then identify and track new opportunities. We can plan to reset our growth strategy by aligning our organization around a refreshed strategy and agreeing the steps needed to execute it across the touch points that matter. So my point is, instead of pulling out the crystal ball, which no one has, we control and influence what we can control and influence now. We plan for whatever situation we will find ourselves in the future.
You've touched on this a little earlier. Is there any way of helping to revive consumer confidence in these conditions, or is it naive to think we can do so?
Well, earlier you're right, Willie. I touched on at least 2 points. One is the challenge to reignite demand. Okay? And I was saying that one of the appropriate responses from brands, from organizations, is to signal recovery. And at this point, signaling recovery, we are equating to signaling hygiene. So if we are able to do that in a meaningful, impactful way, then we can hope to reignite demand again within the context of how institutions will behave, how the disease will behave, and how people will behave. I just got reminded, Willie, that in the Chinese character of the word crisis, there are two elements. One means danger, and the other one means opportunity. And truly, every pandemic, every crisis brings with it dangers as well as opportunities. So it's really up to us how we look at it. Who was it who said that every crisis is precious and we should never waste it? So I think the companies that will succeed through the pandemic and after the pandemic is over are those that continue to listen to the market they serve, those that display kindness to their own people, their partners, and the public at large to the furthest extent that they can. Those that stay true to their brand purpose and communicate consistently. Those that innovate around the needs and behaviors of consumers that are evolving through the crisis, and those that make themselves available where their market can reach them. And finally, those that deliver the best possible customer experience despite the huge difficulties. And as you can imagine, doing all of these within this crisis where budgets are all challenged necessitates reinventing and remodeling the organization. And again, I'll circle back to the fact that is where the importance of scenario planning comes in.
Thank you, Gary. Simon, let's talk about how a business owner or manager should go about planning recovery. What factors should be considered? Can you take us through a checklist?
Yeah, sure. And the checklist, just to start off with, the checklist very much depends what situation you're in. So we have suppliers of essential goods that, especially in cleaning and hygiene, for example, that find themselves in a very different situation than operators of malls, right? So depending on who you talk to, the checklist looks quite different. But there's the comment of Gary is still very valid, right? The scenario planning really matters, and I'll talk a little bit about that also a little bit later. But I think that the key topics that we're helping our clients solve and wrestle with at the moment are a couple, right? One is re-engaging your customers, shoppers, and consumers in a more digital fashion. Right, so they've moved online. They've upped their digital intake of information. They've started using social commerce much more. Even grandfathers and grandmothers have. Right, so what's the new future look like of engagement with consumers and shoppers and even customers? Right, what's your digital sales process looks like, and e-payments and all of that come into play. The second thing that a lot of CPG, consumer packaged goods, and FMCGs are thinking about is reimagining their offer, understanding the new behavior, making an offer more safe, more healthy, more occasions for the at-home, more designed products for the at-home occasion. So how does that differ from what you currently have? But also, what do I need to do to make my products more affordable and have a better value for money perception and proposition is critical in all categories. Especially for FMCGs, rethinking your route to market. So how your product goes from your manufacturing plant to the small sari store, as well as to the convenience stores. Because we've seen a lot of disruption in that landscape We've seen it in China, India, Indonesia, and at some point it will come to the Philippines as well. So there's new players in the market that help digitally distribute your products. I think the next one is your operating model. So what a lot of CEOs tell us is that they love the fact that they make decisions much, much faster. So how do I keep that agility of decision making in my new operating model? How do I move away from silos to more teamwork? But also, how do some of those that are harder hit really rethink their structural cost base, and do they need to close stores because they're severely hit? I think the next one is acceleration of digital across the business, from setting prices, promotions, finding the right assortment, to understanding what unleashes the best in people. So digital technology and analytics can really help in that, and we see a lot of others invest in those. Then there's a bit around supply chain and making it more resilient, agile, and flexible. So from just in time to just in time and just in case. So making sure that you can provide. And Gary talked a little bit about stocking up and some spare capacity in the supply chain and doing that smartly. The one around M&A. So we've seen some players struggle a bit more, helping them out, acquiring them to also help your expansion into new categories or new geographies is a topic. And the last bit, and I think it's been mentioned by all of my fellow panelists, is communicating, over-communicating and communicating purpose, especially also around sustainability and the environment, given that there has been, given that a lot of the new generation consumers care a lot about what a brand stands for and its purpose. So I'm just going to stop here. I can go on and on with the topics, but here's a quick list of things that we're helping our clients think through and wrestle with. Again, in the context of, we don't know what's going to happen, so we'll think about different versions of all of this depending on how the future looks like. So Gary's point around scenario planning is still very valid.
Right. I've read a couple of articles from McKinsey which say that a business planner right now has to have the mindset of a military commander at a campaign or in a war. Can you just expound a bit on that?
It's you stole my closing, Willy. You stole my closing. But no worries. Happy to do it briefly. But basically, yes. So we've interviewed quite a few people that have to make really tough decisions, right? And that's generals in war situations. So we've looked at what they do, and 99% of the people in a war situation are fighting a battle, right? Which is what most of your people are doing at the moment. But some people need to think ahead, and the military has a team called the Plan Ahead team. And they actually do exactly that. They start to think about some of these severe changes that can happen as a result of the battle. And they think about the next 3 to 5 battles that they need to fight, right? So to give you an example, one of the CEOs that we had a conversation with and helped afterwards was super happy because she was in semiconductor manufacturing, and the world is looking for more semiconductors in this cloud-based environment. So she was in seventh heaven for about 2 weeks until the Mexican government decided to close her plant that was operating. So she said, had I had the time to think about everything that could have happened 2 weeks earlier, I would have taken different actions. So it's very much what Gary says on planning ahead, scenario planning, what could happen, and which of the moves or which of the actions I can take are no regret actions. So irrespective of the scenario and irrespective of what happens, which things make sense, and what are things that I do dynamically and only trigger if certain conditions improve or deteriorate, right? So that's a little bit of the what we mean with a Plan Ahead team, and it's very much based on lessons from the military, where a small group of people spend 100% of the time thinking about what's next.
Thank you, Simon. Winn, let's go to you for a few more questions. In one of its latest reports, your mother company identified 5 priorities amid this pandemic, and it's very interesting, particularly the last 2 points: to serve our customers across all channels as they adapt adapt to the shifting demands of consumers during the crisis. And the last one being to best position ourselves to emerge strong when this crisis ends. Can you just take us through that?
Yeah, working for a company and being part of a company that has such a long and proud history like the Coca-Cola Company, one of the things we do have on our side is the ability to go back and look through time and to see, how has our business performed coming out of crises, coming out of issues, wars, pandemics, you name it. And one of the things we've consistently seen is, as we focus on the consumer and as we focus on that need and that change of the consumer and staying as close as possible to that consumer, when we do emerge from that crisis or when we do emerge from that issue, whether it's a global or a country-specific issue, we do emerge stronger. And in fact, we see that not only do we emerge stronger, the entire ecosystem with which we operate seems to operate at a much higher rate as well. And so I think it's, again, back to some of what Gary and Simon and others were talking about, is really having that clear scenario plan and understanding, where the consumer's headed, what are those needs that we're going to try to meet. Maybe it looks very different than what we're doing today, and how do we adapt to that and how do we change to it? But a lot of the core will still remain as to where it is today, and it will still be a large focus on ours. So we're excited. As always, it's never fun going through a crisis or a pandemic. I can tell you, living in the Philippines for the last 3 years, the number of crises and the number of opportunities that arise in a place like the Philippines has only prepared it, I feel, to be even stronger coming out. The resiliency of the Filipino consumer, the resiliency of even the companies that operate here is second to none. And for myself, coming from the U.S. and North America, Western culture, it's amazing to see, even during the pandemic, of how the country is still able to operate to some extent. The only other thing I was going to remind or kind of share is that as we think about demand and we think about where we're headed coming out of this pandemic, is that different than crises in the past that have been, whether it's economic recessions or natural disasters, a lot of this pandemic has been somewhat self-inflicted. And what I mean by that is, outside of the pandemic itself, the lockdown that we've created and the artificial restraining of movement of consumers and people, it has been self-inflicted. And so what we're curious to see is, when you come out of an environment like a quarantine, when you come out of an environment of where people have been enclosed for so long, what does that demand look like? Because we do know that there is going to be some pent-up demand. When you look at countries like Vietnam that have already come out, when you look at China, when you look at Korea, Taiwan for that matter, that there is this pent-up demand that we do see coming out that we are excited about. And so it is going to be an interesting dynamic as the Philippines continues to evolve through this. And as always, and where you started, I think we're going to be continuing our strategies of following the consumer and focus on that affordability play, but ensuring that we do come out of this crisis even stronger.
Right. I think I'll just go to a few questions from the audience. From Sheila Eloria to Coke. What are your plans, if any, in the area of product innovation to address changed or changing consumer behavior and mindsets?
Sure. Well, what's very interesting, I'm surprised maybe a Simon or a Gary haven't talked about this yet, is actually in this pandemic, we've actually simplified our innovation and our product offering. If you think about it, in the countries we operate in, we have several hundred different options out there. But from a supply chain perspective, from ensuring that we have that customer demand that we're trying to meet, we've actually pulled in some of the innovation and pulled in some of the production that we normally would do on any given day. And so because of that, we now are starting to rethink even how we think about innovation. What are those true innovations that we need from a consumer perspective? I think Simon, Gary, and the team have all commented on, what are some of those health benefits or safety benefits that consumers are looking for? What are those even occasions or where they're actually consuming it? Is it going to be a more at-home consumption versus an on-the-go consumption as we would define it? And so because of that, we are starting to think through what are those implications for our consumers. We've seen certain categories like our Wilkins water brand, our Minute Maid juice brand, and others, NutriBoost dairy brands are all starting to grow quite a bit, as well as we see consumers looking for some of those category benefits and some of those brand promises and benefits that will also provide whether it's a safe experience or even a added benefit experience of the consumption as well.
Thank you, Winn. There is a question for Globe from Lucien Di Choco, although there are two others in the audience that have similar questions. What is Globe now doing to address higher demand for use of data? What measures have you done to meet the anticipated demand in the next 12 months, especially in terms of the need of serving online schools and e-commerce?
Okay. The plan really hasn't changed. No, we've been aggressive the past few years and continue to be aggressive in upgrading our network, putting on fiber, and as well as firing up new sites. No, maybe a change, probably a slight change in plans is really adjusting to the new traffic patterns, as mentioned earlier. As a lot more people are probably going to stay at home, and we'll probably need more cell sites and capacity in residential areas. No? We will also continue to appeal and work with the various government agencies, particularly the LGU and the barangays, no, on how we can work together, no, to get these cell sites up, no, in their areas. And we also appeal, no, to our consumers and to the communities to accept and allow our facilities, as we need these facilities as near as possible to the consumers, so that they can enjoy, no, better and faster internet. No, as we say, we would like to give them first world internet. No, um, and we look forward to working even with the private sectors on uh, working with uh, their connectivity requirements, and working together on how we can roll out our facilities faster. No? We've seen a lot of uh, online learning and e-commerce requirements, and we have also taken this into consideration and have included this in our plans, and will be supporting, no, by giving capacity where it is needed.
Thank you, Vince. Perhaps it's time for closing statements from our panelists to end today's session. Maybe we can go to Nicky. Nicky?
I guess in closing, we in Entrego have a vision, and our vision is to enable trade and commerce. Given the new environment that we face, I guess we're right smack in the middle of it. And as everyone and as everyone has mentioned, it is quite clear how important it is for any business to be resilient and adaptive, by having plans to be able to support its aspirations moving forward in whatever environment it is in. If I asked anybody in the audience, going back to December, Christmas time 2019, would anyone had thought that we would actually be listening to a bunch of people over the internet discussing the results of a pandemic that has kept us in our homes for close to 12 weeks? I guess the answer will be, for most people, not at all. So I guess it really goes to show the importance of being ready at any given point in time as we move forward. The importance of being able to pivot our business, to be able to take advantage, and as Gary had rightly put it, crisis is both a danger and an opportunity. Really depends on how you go about doing your business to take advantage of it. I'd like to just go back to my earlier comment about, I really believe that as we move towards this new normal, it is really a blank page of new beginnings. We just need to understand how the consumers' consumption habits have changed and how we can adapt to that. How everybody now leads this contactless, and how we now live in this contactless environment. How health and hygiene will play a very important role in all our lives moving forward. and how we as individuals react and proactively participate in that new normal. As much as we would like to say, I'd like to go back to pre-COVID, I think it is quite clear, as everybody has explained through, I'm sure, the series of talks that you have, that this is where we are for now. Let us embrace it. Let us aspire to be better at it. And as everybody said, let's all try to work with each other to be able to surpass this new crisis or this crisis that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicky. Next to give his closing remarks will be Vince of Globe.
Okay.
Vince?
Okay. A post-COVID future-proof company is one that is agile and resilient. Being able to pivot based on the needs of the company and more importantly, its customers is vital for businesses to continue to thrive amidst this crisis. Companies will have to go through some transformation, no doubt, especially digitally post-COVID. For sure, there will always be apprehensions and fears, especially for employees and the workforce, in adapting to the new ways of working. But we need to take it on. We should be able to identify key business processes and interactions that can be enabled and streamlined digitally. Having the capability to run businesses remotely and reach out to their customers, even with the limited physical interaction, empowers owners and management to still achieve positive results in spite of this new reality. Partnerships are also vital. Partnerships between the private sector and together with the government. Companies can learn from each other and work together post-COVID. Okay? In the past few months, we've learned to work together, not just as corporations, but also with the government in raising funds, sharing best practices, especially digital practices, and forming strategic partnerships, etc. In our case, we continue to cultivate our partnership with the government, particularly the LGU, so that we can work on our mission to provide better connectivity and for us to be able to bring our facilities to our consumers. Last but not the least, it's really taking care of our greatest assets, which are our employees. A well-equipped and healthy workforce supported their company can perform better and contribute more when they have less to worry about during this crisis. Taking their needs and concerns into consideration and even developing them during this crisis will help companies reap benefits and weather the storm.
Thank you, Vince. For the next speaker, Winn of Coca-Cola, may we have your final remarks?
Great. Well, thank you again for having me today, Willie, and Business World, and excited to hear from all the other speakers as well. I think in closing, it's really where I started. At Coca-Cola, we have a purpose and a belief that our responsibility is to refresh the world and make a difference. And now more than ever, it's our turn to make a difference here in the Philippines and here globally. And as I alluded to before, it's a very simple way of thinking about it, but it's ensuring we put our people first and we take care of our people, whether it's through our safety and jobs and welfare, ensuring that the communities with which we operate in, we live in, our kids go to schools and even are thriving. So whether that's giving back and ensuring that they have our beverages, they have the PPE equipment they need, as well as the 1 million plus small store owners and small business owners within this country have the ability to not only reopen their business, but to continue to thrive and grow within their businesses they operate. But then finally is to rethink of what our business will look like and what our country even will look like coming out of this crisis. And as someone alluded to earlier, never wasting a crisis or an opportunity. We do think it's a great opportunity for us to emerge stronger, whether it's focusing on our e-commerce platform or our digital platform, thinking through how our route to market may evolve or may change over time, as well as even thinking through our product innovation and thinking through what those new consumer needs are, that whether it's at home or trying to signal to the consumer that it is okay to leave from your home. But All that being said, we are confident that not only the Coca-Cola business here in the Philippines, but the Philippines will emerge stronger. We believe that the Philippines is one of our most resilient countries with which we operate, and are very confident about not only weathering the storm here in 2020 and maybe even a little beyond, but as we get to that next normal and as we get to that future for the Philippines, it will be just as bright as it was before. So thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Winn. Next, we have Gary of Kantar. May we have your final views?
Thanks again, Willy, and thanks to Business World. At the core of this crisis are two things: the disease and the disruption. We don't have direct control over the disease. We can only influence by lobbying for funding or actions or helping those who are trying to control it. The disruption is the element that is not entirely new to many of us because we have been through disruptions before. And we must stay focused on the reality that this is a disruption because we can learn from prior disruptions. Out of the awful events of 9/11 came a huge disruption and a crisis of confidence. But later on, it gave birth to TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. It did not appear suddenly, but once it did, it was a very clear signal that every time people entered an airport, they were going to be safe. Is it perfect? No. Is it inconvenient? Sure, and very often. But that is not the point. The point is that it is effective. All the security measures, both those with teeth and those that are more about security theater, provide unmistakable signals to travelers that the environment is secure, that institutions governing travel are in control, and that travelers should have confidence about their own safety. Our current crisis is similar in many regards, with fear for our health, confusion about what is safe, and hesitation to engage in the marketplace as the hallmarks of today. But this is a disruption that brands can help relieve and resolve. At a time when, first and foremost, people fear for their health, it's hygiene instead of TSA security checks. The biggest opportunity for sparking demand is to deliver new and unmistakable signals that it is safe to enter the marketplace again. Done properly, clear and well-executed signals of hygiene will tell everyone that it is safe to get back, that businesses are free from the virus, that brands are in control, and that people can have confidence again. So we believe that businesses and brands need a comprehensive and clear approach that signals hygiene. However, signaling hygiene goes well beyond ad campaigns and packaging. Signaling hygiene is more than an email to a brand's audience, more than advertising discounts, more than a big sign that says, "We are open for business." Signaling hygiene that rings true to your brand purpose and personality is only the beginning. Demonstrating kindness is the next step because in this time of uncertainty, everyone expects kindness. Pushing for relevant innovation that truly addresses the new consumer frictions. Communicating through meaningful and powerful stories on touch points that effectively reach your target consumers. Being always and easily available in all relevant platforms, and delivering constantly delightful customer experience will require a layered and complex process that will challenge norms and push innovation efforts into uncomfortable spaces. But the result will be people feeling the confidence, the assurance, and the desire to engage again with brands. Kantar has been helping our clients around the world through this process, and we are also here on the ground to help you understand people and inspire growth. Thanks again, and stay safe.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, Simon, any parting insights?
Yes, so thank you for having me, Business World. I find it very inspiring to listen to my fellow panelists and also reading some of the comments from the audience. Thank you very much for that. And thank you once again. And I don't know if people are listening, but thanks once again to the people fighting this on the front. What they're solving is a first and foremost priority of getting this under control and keeping people safe. So thank you for that. As I mentioned earlier, no one knows what the future brings. No one has that crystal ball that we talked about several times. We've seen shifts take place in days that earlier took decades. Telemedicine, school and education, home delivery, you name it. Shifts that took decades happened in days or weeks. And behavior is changing, and some of it will prove sticky, and other behavior will revert to what it was before. But what we do know is that your budget for 2020 is broken. It's hard to predict 2021. You do need to think more dynamically. You need to plan under uncertainty. And one of the comments on Facebook was, let's not use military analogies. I don't think we have to. It's all about the plan ahead team and thinking about what are the potential outcomes, what are the potential scenarios, what are the no regret moves, and what's the dynamic roadmap that we keep on refreshing as reality catches up, or as we catch up with reality, I must say. So all of you will probably have a crisis response team. I think now it's time to think about a set of people that start planning ahead and focus on the things that matter, could matter, or don't matter. And that plan ahead team should have one thing in the back of their minds, and to echo the point that in every crisis is rich with opportunity. I would just close with saying, don't just think about returning, but reimagine.
Thank you, Simon. And that's it for today's Business World Insights. We thank our panelists for their valuable inputs, our sponsors, DSM Group, Globe, Entrego, and Unilab, as well as you, our audience. Join us again a week from now on the 3rd of June for the next session on improving the country's healthcare and welfare system. Until then, keep well, everyone.
Scale of this pandemic is much larger than the regular set of crises that we face every year.
The government should trust the private sector to behave responsibly.
It is not that they are not thankful. It's not that they're worried. They know that whatever assistance is being given to them is not sustainable.
To me, the big lesson seems to be that the preparedness matters.